Well, this is the Dove Lady back with reading this book, the Spirit's book. I kind of got sidetracked because I was getting fascinated by the orbs that I was capturing in my camera and making videos of the different things about the orbs. But I'm back now, and the house is quiet. The family's off on a vacation to the coast, and I didn't go, and I'm glad because I have this time without any interruptions or knowing that I'm being overheard and maybe it's bothering someone to hear me in my room talking. Little things like that can make you feel a little hesitant about reading something with feeling. And this book certainly brings out a lot of feeling in me. And in the last video I talked about these spirits that were bothering me and the solution I had to that. And I don't think I can be convinced that I should hate evil spirits. I would prefer to say, love them into the light, but don't let them run roughshod all over you. Now to begin again with this part of the book, and let's see. Incarnated spirits inhabit the different globes of the universe. Spirits who are not incarnated, who are errant, do not occupy any fixed or circumscribed region. They are everywhere, in space and around us, seeing us and mixing with us incessantly. They constitute an invisible population, constantly moving and busy about us on every side. Spirits exert an incessant action upon the moral world and even upon the physical world. They act both upon matter and upon thought and constitute one of the powers of nature, the efficient cause of many classes of phenomena hitherto unexplained or misinterpreted, and of which only the spiritist theory can give a rational explanation. Spirits are incessantly in relation with men. The good spirits try to lead us into the right road, sustain us under the trials of life, and aid us to bear them with courage and resignation. The bad ones tempt us to evil. It is a pleasure for them to see us fall and to make us like themselves. The communications of spirits with men are either occult or ostensible. Their occult communications are made through the good or bad influence they exert on us without our being aware of it. It is our duty to distinguish, by the exercise of our judgment, between the good and the bad inspirations that are thus brought to bear upon us. Their ostensible communications take place by means of writing, of speech, or of other physical manifestations, and usually through the intermediary of the mediums who serve as their instruments. Spirits manifest themselves spontaneously or in response to evocation. All spirits may be evoked, those who have animated the most obscure of mortals, as well as those of the most illustrious personages, and whatever the epoch at which they lived, those of our relatives, our friends, or our enemies, and we may obtain from them, by written or by verbal communication, counsels, information in regard to their situation beyond the grave, their thoughts in regard to us, and whatever revelations they are permitted to make to us. Spirits are attracted by their sympathy with the moral quality of the parties by whom they are evoked. Spirits of superior elevation take pleasure in meetings of a serious character, animated by the love of goodness and the sincere desire of instruction and improvement. Their presence repels the spirits of inferior degree, who find, on the contrary, free access and freedom of action among persons of frivolous disposition, are brought together by mere curiosity, and wherever evil instincts are to be met with. So far from obtaining from spirits under such circumstances either good advice or useful information, nothing is to be expected from them but trifling lies, ill-natured tricks, or humbugging, for they often borrow the most venerated names in order the better to impose upon those with whom they are in communication. It is easy to distinguish between good and bad spirits. The language of spirits of superior elevation is constantly dignified, noble, characterized by the highest morality, free from every trace of earthly passion. Their counsels breathe the purest wisdom, and always have our improvement and the good of mankind for their aim. The communication of spirits of lower degree, on the contrary, are full of discrepancies, and their language is often commonplace and even coarse. If they sometimes say things that are good and true, they more often make false and absurd statements prompted by ignorance or malice. They play upon the credulity of those who interrogate them, amusing themselves by flattering their vanity and fooling them with false hopes. In a word, instructive communications worthy of the name are only to be obtained in sinners of a serious character, whose members are united by an intimate communion of thought and desire in the pursuit of truth and goodness. The moral teaching of the higher spirits may be summed up like that of Christ in the gospel maxim, "Do unto others as you would that others should do unto you." That is to say, do good to all and wrong no one. This principle of action furnishes mankind with a rule of conduct of universal application, from the smallest matters to the greatest. They teach us that selfishness, pride, sensuality are passions which bring us back towards the animal nature, by attracting us to matter, that he who in this lower life detaches himself from matter through contempt of worldly trifles and through love of the neighbor, brings himself back towards the spiritual nature, that we should all make ourselves useful according to the means which God has placed in our hands for our trial, that the strong and powerful owe aid and protection to the weak, and that he who misuses strength and power to oppress his fellow creatures violates the law of God. They teach us that in the spirit world nothing can be hidden, and that the hypocrite will there be unmasked and all his wickedness unveiled, that the presence unavoidable and perpetual of those whom we have wronged in the earthly life is one of the punishments that awaits us in the spirit world, and that the lower or higher state of spirits gives rise in that other life to sufferings or to enjoyments unknown to us upon the earth. But they also teach us that there are no unpardonable sins, none that cannot be effaced by expiation. Man finds the means of accomplishing this in the different existences which permit him to advance progressively and according to his desire and his efforts toward the perfection that constitutes his ultimate aim. Such is the sum of spiritist doctrine as contained in the teachings given by spirits of high degree. Let us now consider the objections that are urged against it. Many persons regard the opposition of the learned world as constituting, if not a proof, at least a very strong presumption of the falsity of Spiritism. We are not of those who affect indifference in regard to the judgment of scientific men. On the contrary, we hold them in great esteem. and should think it an honor to be of their number. But we cannot consider their opinion as being, under all circumstances, necessarily and absolutely conclusive. When the votaries of science go beyond the bare observation of facts, when they attempt to appraise and to explain those facts, they enter upon the field of conjecture. Each advances a system of his own, which he does his utmost to bring into favor, and defends with might and with main. Do we not see every day the most divergent systems brought forward and rejected one after the other, now cried down as absurd errors, and now cried up as incontestable truths? Facts are the sole criteria of reality, the sole argument that admits of no reply. In the absence of facts, the wise man suspends his judgment. In regard to all matters that have already been fully examined, the verdict of the learned is justly held to be authoritative because their knowledge of them is fuller and more enlightened than that of ordinary men. But in regard to new facts or principles, to matters imperfectly known, their opinion can only be hypothetic, because they are no more exempt from prejudice than other people. It may even be said that scientific men are more apt to be prejudiced than the rest of the world, because each of them is naturally inclined to look at everything from the special point of view that has been adopted by him, the mathematician admitting to no other order of proof than that of his algebraic demonstration, the chemist referring everything to the action of the elements, etc. When a man has made for himself a specialty, he usually devotes his whole mind to it. Beyond the scope of this specialty, he often reasons falsely, because, owing to the weakness of human reason, he insists on treating every subject in the same way. And therefore, while we should willingly and confidently consult a chemist in regard to a question of analysis, a physicist in regard to electricity, a mechanician in regard to the motive power, we must be allowed, without in any way derogating from the respect due to their special knowledge, to attach no more weight to their unfavorable opinion of spiritism than we should do to the judgment of an architect on a question relating to the theory of music. The positive sciences are based on the properties of matter, which may be experimented upon and manipulated at pleasure, but spiritist phenomena are an effect of the action of intelligences who have wills of their own, and who constantly show us that they are not subjected to ours. The observation of facts, therefore, cannot be carried on in the latter case in the same way as in the former one, for they proceed from another source and require special conditions, and, consequently, to insist upon submitting them to the same methods of investigation is to insist on assuming the existence of analogies that do not exist. Science properly so called is therefore incompetent, as such, to decide the question of the truth of spiritism. It has nothing to do with it, and its verdict in regard to it, whether favorable or otherwise, is of no weight. Spiritist belief is the result of a personal conviction that scientific men may hold as individuals and independent of their quality as scientists. But to submit the question to the decision of physical science would be much the same thing as to set a company of physicists and astronomers to decide the question of immortality. Spiritism deals exclusively with the existence of the soul and its state after death, and it is supremely unreasonable to assume that a man must be a great psychologist simply because he is a great mathematician, or a great anatomist. The anatomist, when dissecting a human body, looks for the soul, and he does not find it under his scalpel, as he finds a nerve or sees it evaporate as does a gas. He concludes that it does not exist because he reasons from an exclusive material point of view. But it by no means follows that he is right and that the opinion of the rest of the world is wrong. We see, therefore, that the task of deciding as to the truth or falsity of Spiritism does not fall within the scope of physical science. When Spiritist beliefs shall have become generalized, when they shall have been accepted by the masses, and if we may judge by the rapidity with which they are being propagated, that time can hardly be very distant. It will be with those beliefs as with all new ideas that have encountered opposition, and scientific men will end by yielding to the force of evidence. They will be brought individually by the force of things to admit ideas that they now reject, and until then, it would be premature to turn them from their special studies in order to occupy them with a matter which is foreign alike to their habits of thought and to their spheres of investigation. Meanwhile, those who, without a careful preparatory study of the matter, pronounce a negative verdict in regard to it and throw ridicule upon all who are not of their way of thinking, forget that such has been done in regard to nearly all the great discoveries and that honor the human race. They risk seeing their names added to the list of illustrious proscribers of new ideas and classed with those of the members of the learned assembly, which in 1752 received Franklin's paper on lightning rods with peals of laughter, and voted it to be unworthy of mention among the communications addressed to it, or with that other one which caused France to miss the advantage of taking the lead in the application of steam to shipping by declaring Fulton's plans to be impracticable. And yet these subjects lay within their competence. If those two assemblies, which numbered the most eminent scientists of the world among their members, had only contempt and sarcasm for ideas which they did not understand, but which were destined to revolutionize, a few years later, science, industry, and daily life, how can we hope that a question foreign to their labors should meet with any greater degree of favor in their hands? The erroneous judgments of learned men in regard to certain discoveries, though regrettable for the honor of their memory, do not invalidate the title to our esteem acquired by them in regard to other matters. But is common sense only to be found associated with an official diploma? And are there only fools and simpletons outside the walls of scientific institutions? Let our opponents condescend to glance over the ranks of the partitions of Spiritism and see whether they contain only persons of inferior understanding, or whether, on the contrary, considering the immense number of men of worth by whom it has been embraced, it can be regarded as belonging to the category of old wives' fables, whether in fact the character and scientific knowledge of its adherents do not rather deserve that it should be said, when such men affirm a matter, there must at least be something in it. We repeat that if the facts we are about to consider had been limited to the mechanical movements of inert bodies, physical science would have been competent to seek out the physical cause of the phenomena. But the manifestations in question, being professedly beyond the action of laws or forces yet known to man, they are necessarily beyond the competence of human science. When the facts to be observed are novel and do not fall within the scope of any known science, the scientist, in order to study them, should throw his science temporarily aside, remembering that a new study cannot be fruitfully prosecuted under the influence of preconceived ideas. He who believes his reason to be infallible is very near to error. Even those whose ideas are of the falsest profess to base them on reason, and it is in the name of reason that they reject whatever seems to them to be impossible. They who formerly rejected the admirable discoveries that are the glory of the human mind did so in the name of reason. For what men call reason is often only pride disguised, and whoever regards himself as infallible virtually claims to be God's equal. We therefore address ourselves to those who are reasonable enough to suspend their judgment in regard to what they have not yet seen, and who, judging of the future by the past, do not believe that man has reached his apogee, or that nature has turned over to him the last leaf of her book, I think that should be. The last leaf of her book. Let us add that the study of such a theory as that of Spiritism, which introduces us at once to an order of ideas so novel and so grand, can only be faithfully pursued by persons of a serious turn of mind, persevering, free from prejudice, and animated by a firm and sincere determination to arrive at the truth. We should not give this qualification to those who decide in regard to such a subject a priori, lightly, and without thorough examination, who bring to the work of study neither the method, the regularity, nor the sustained attention necessary to success. Still less could we give it to those who, not to lose their reputation for wit and sharpness, seek to turn into ridicule matters of the most serious import, or that are judged to be such by persons whose knowledge, character, and conventions should command respect. Let those who consider the facts in question as unworthy of their attention abstain from studying them. No one would attempt to interfere with their belief, but let them on their part respect the belief of those who are of a contrary opinion.